Alrighty. Um, hey guys, I wanted to do a quick live stream today, talk to you a little bit about some of my opinions and frustrations with GoPro cameras. And I'm going to dig into that in a second. I just want to do a little housekeeping here before we, kind of dig into this. For the first 10 minutes or so, I'm going to kind of just share some of my opinions. I'm not going to be in the chat so much for the first 10 minutes because I want people that are tuning in specifically to see the thing about the GoPros and my opinions on them kind of up front. If you haven't watched this channel before, it's been a while. I'm Steve Reichert, and this is Living Vertical Outdoors. And really, the focus of this channel is, as I like to call it, photography for the working class. And the reason why I'm making this video, I'm fairly brand agnostic when it comes to cameras. I shoot with a lot of different types of cameras, and I enjoy a lot of different types of cameras, but the GoPro has been one that I've gotten questions about over the years. And very recently, actually, one of my friends asked me about buying a camera for sort of all around, a little bit of video, a little bit of photography, and she said, she really found the GoPro cameras appealing. So what I want to do is just give you a little bit of background, kind of what my usage of GoPro cameras has been, and then show you some pictures that I have to kind of compare and kind of illustrate what I'm talking about and some of my frustrations with the GoPro cameras. Because basically, when I was asked about the GoPro cams, I just said, don't, not really a good idea. Don't get them. And that's just kind of, that's overall my perspective on it. But I want to share a little bit more of why. So I have been using GoPro cameras on and off for probably since like 2011 or so, when like the first series of GoPros came out. And I have to say their marketing is really, really solid. Um, they make their cameras look really, really good. And I also want to be really clear about the fact that this is my opinion, and my opinion is based on my experience in terms of why I hate GoPro cameras. It doesn't mean that there is no situation in which a GoPro camera is useful or, the right tool for the job. But when it comes to cameras, like, you can use, for example, like I have this knife here. All right, this is clearly not a knife that is meant for cooking and culinary work. I could probably prepare a steak with this knife. I could probably eat a meal with this knife or use it for a variety of functions that it was not intended for. It would work, but it would not be the best tool for the job. And so when I started shooting with GoPros, it was mostly for video work, and I was doing a lot with climbing. And as you probably know, there's been a pretty strong relationship between GoPro cameras and adventure lifestyle and adventure content, and being able to capture stuff that would otherwise be really difficult to get with a traditional camera. I remember when they first came out, a lot of it was like motocross stuff and surfing, skydiving, and there's no argument from my standpoint if you're going to be spending a lot of time on a surfboard or jumping out of a plane, uh, paragliding, etc. A GoPro can be a great tool for the job. But if you already know that that's what you're shooting, you're probably not watching this and thinking, oh, maybe, should I get something else? You already know that type of camera is what you need based on the type of content that you're shooting. My perspective on the GoPro cameras is really more from a standpoint of, again, photography for the working class. In other words, somebody who says, I have $500 and I want a camera that can do a little bit of everything, maybe not something that's specialized to do one thing only, but that can do a little bit of everything. And you have to make that purchase count. Not talking to people that are writing cameras off on their taxes, or that they, had a successful career so they can afford to, kind of be in business as a photographer and not make any money. And so they just kind of dump, money into their gear as a taxable or tax write off. Which, I mean, nothing wrong with that if that's what you're doing, but that's not really my focus. So, you know, I've noticed in watching a lot of TV shows, I watch Curse of Oak Island sometimes. It's one of those horrible History Channel shows. You can tell there's certain shots that are GoPro shots. And the benefit of the GoPro is that it gets into places where it can be left unmanned and it captures angles that are really difficult for a person to capture. But if we're talking about general photography, the three main, and even on some level video stuff, but I'm focused more on photography here. The three main gripes that I have with the GoPro cameras are, I'm going to start off with ergonomics. So anytime you have a camera that is this small, and this thing is clearly really tiny, anytime you have a camera this small, you're going to have a benefit that it's very portable and there's a lot of good things you can do with it, but the features that you need to be able to access and the things you need to be able to use are going to be much more condensed. And one of the reasons why I am an avid fan of Fuji cameras, more so than any other brand, at least for still photography, is because of the fact that Fuji cameras are very easy to use and ergonomically they're very well laid out. And I think that is something that most people overlook. Um, I think it's really easy to get lost in, the sexy marketing of somebody doing skydiving or surfing with a tiny little camera, but then you forget about the benefits of actually having a little more real estate to work with and having your aperture and your shutter speed and your ISO laid out very discreetly and distinctly, and everything laid out in a way that makes the camera very easy to use. And I think even more so than any other type of brands, I like Fuji, or I appreciate them for that fact. And when you have a camera that's as tiny as a GoPro, the ergonomics are going to suffer because it's harder to hold on to. And also you have to go into menus that are accessed by Wi-Fi. And again, this is an older GoPro. This is the Hero 5 Session, and there's like been a million GoPros. And as I was starting to say earlier, I've shot with a lot of different GoPros over the years, and every time I've had one, whether it's video or photo, I get sucked into the marketing, and I'm like, man, that looks really badass. I bet I could do some awesome stuff if I just had one of these GoPros. And I get one, and then I use it for a while, and I get a couple of good shots, but it's not worth it, and then I'm just, the hell with it. I sell it on eBay. And then a couple years later, maybe I should try that again. Maybe I didn't really give it enough of a chance. Maybe they've improved it. And so I've been back and forth. I think the last one that I had before the session, and the reason why I got this is strictly to have something that was waterproof that I could use, with the intention at one point of shooting some fishing content that never really materialized. But I just don't like the GoPro platform for number one, the usability. So to access a lot of the menus, you have only a couple of buttons, and then you have to rely on Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to get into a lot of those menus, and that smartphone connectivity, which has in the past been unreliable, number one, and drains the battery, number two. And so just one of the best things about a camera that you can say is that it makes you want to use it. It's very easy to just start shooting with it, which is one of the reasons why, if you've never tried shooting film, that can be really nice because you don't have as many settings to monkey around with, especially depending on the type of, point and shoot film camera that you have. And to some extent, even point and shoot digital cameras I like better than a GoPro because everything that you need to access, you can see what you're doing. It's pretty straightforward, and so you want to use it more. You're not guessing. You're not stabbing in the dark. It's ergonomically very well laid out. And all of that combines to ties up into usability. The more usable a camera is, the more you're going to use it, obviously. The more you shoot with it, the higher the likelihood is that you capture something that is interesting, and by extension, you sharpen your own creative skill by using that camera more and shooting with it more, so you're more in tune with it, and then you capture better images. If something is a pain in the ass to use, you're going to want to use it less, which is the reason why this has been sitting in a box for, the last year or so. Whereas the Fuji is really easy. I turn it on, I can look, I can see everything in front of me. I have access to everything that I want to use, not in a digital format, but in a very tactile format, knobs, switches externally available. And that's something that, in my opinion, gets very little attention with all the marketing that concentrates on the technical specifications and like all the sexy stuff that sounds better but doesn't really translate into better photographs. Um, and then image quality is the other thing, with the GoPros, that I have never really been a huge fan of. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually switch over to my desktop here, and I want to show you a handful of images. And, I want to take a look at these and just discuss a few things. Now, again, my perspective on this is mostly in photography. And this photo I shot when I was living in a trailer, very tight space, and the GoPro made sense as a platform because it had a very wide field of view. It had kind of that fisheye thing going, and that enabled me to capture something that was otherwise inaccessible using a normal camera. But again, it's very distinctive. When you see this, you can see around the corners there's some vignetting and some distortion, which are not the end of the world, but every picture you take is going to kind of have that look to it. And I wanted to contrast some of the GoPro images with some images that were just taken with a point and shoot Nikon RX100 Mark II, which is available on eBay for like $200 or so. And again, these are not heavily edited images or anything like that, but you can, and again, I'm not trying to get way deep into the specifications, but just showing the look of different cameras compared to the GoPro. I like this look where it's not as distorted and there's a little bit more separation between the subject and the background. These are all taken with the Sony, little Sony point and shoot, nothing, extravagant, no interchangeable lenses, anything like that. Okay. Now this, again, you can tell we're back to the GoPro. There's not a lot of separation. It's a little bit fish-eyed. That's even with some editing and some correction done. I know the lighting is not superb here, so it's not necessarily fair to judge the image quality based on the lighting, but it has a very flat look to it in terms of separation from the background, but it also looks a little bit distorted and fish-eyed at the same time. So it's a weird combination that's very distinctive. Here's the same day out on the water. This is out in Spokane, and this was taken with the Lumix. I think the GH5 is what this was taken with. Okay. So here's some more GoPro shots, and again, fairly distinctive looking. A little bit of editing done here, but to me, I don't love the way the images come off of the GoPro. And again, I took this up. This is in Banff National Park at the summit of the Tower of Babel is the name of this climb. My friend Martin and his dad. And I wanted to try to get as much as I could with this camera, with the GoPro, because, being up in the mountains and, on the top of stuff, you want to capture as much as you can. But these shots, again, it has that characteristic distortion that even with some of the editing, you can still tell what you're dealing with, and like the highlights. And I'm not a big, pixel peeper, but when you have areas of cloud that are that blown out, as you see here, kind of in the upper right-hand corner, that it doesn't really have the dynamic range. And that's something that they could potentially and maybe have even fixed in some of the newer models, but there are always going to be limitations when you have a sensor size that's that tiny in order to keep it, small and consistent with the brand of having a really powerful package that's very small. No puns intended there. This photo and kind of a couple of these going down the descent gully, I kind of like the distortion and the way that it looks, it accentuates the gully that we're descending. And so in this case, the distortion kind of works. Um, Again, here we have some blown out highlights in a scene where there's not like direct light. The light is actually coming from, I'm not shooting directly into the light, but the highlights are kind of blown out there. And again, there's not much separation between the subject and the background, which is, again, not the intent of that camera. It's just that's what the GoPro as a tool is meant for. And that's part of the reason why, I don't think it's an applicable tool for most of the stuff that you want to do, from a general standpoint. Now, these are images that my friend Martin shot a year later, or 2 years later, actually, but he shot this with a point and shoot, a Lumix point and shoot camera. So it's micro four thirds, small sensor, not some, behemoth of a full frame professional quality camera. This is this camera was like 10 years old when he took these pictures. I don't know the exact brand or the serial number, model number, sorry, of the camera, but these were, this is not a really top of the line camera. And no offense to Martin, he and I have joked about this a lot. He still manages to get great photos with it because he knows how to compose and, puts the skill into it, which again, very important point that the photographer makes the photo much more so than the camera does. But there's a lot of good separation. These are completely unedited JPEGs straight out of camera, and there's a lot more separation between the subject here and the background, even with a small point and shoot camera that's not, by any stretch a professional grade, as most people would call it, professional grade. And these are just a few more photos that he took in this series, but just compare that with the other ones, with the GoPro, where it's got more distortion and there's more blowouts in the highlights and etc. This is one of my most flattering images that Martin managed to capture. I have a video about that climb that we're going to eventually produce, but it's sitting on hard drives for right now. Okay, so that's the deal with the image quality. Let's go back to the camera here. I'm going to get into the chat here in a second. So just to summarize, and then I'm going to get into the chat, and then we'll let this live stream go wherever you guys want to take it. Image quality, it has a distinctive look that can work in some cases, but doesn't always work in a lot of cases. It's not a generalist camera. It's like Corvette is really cool for certain things, but if you're going to be driving across country and going on a climbing trip, you don't really want a Corvette for that purpose. Okay, the right tool for the job. The way that I shoot, I found more often than not, like the GoPro works in about 5 to 10% of the situations that I'm shooting. Otherwise, the image quality is not really concurrent or commensurate with what I'm looking for. And then the other thing is really the ergonomics and the usability. The more simple a camera is to use and the more accessible the basic controls are that you need to access, the more you're going to want to use it, and the simpler it's going to be to make photos with it. The more you do that, the more you're going to capture. The more you capture, the better your eye will become, where you actually learn to see what your camera sees, which is one of the reasons why I am a big advocate for fixed lenses instead of zoom lenses. But that's a topic for a different live stream and a different conversation, perhaps. But the consistency of what you see is going to develop, and your eye is going to develop in accordance with that if you have a camera that's easy to use and you're using it frequently. And so, and the ergonomics, there's a certain sweet spot that you can get a camera so small, and then if you go any smaller, it's too small. So I think everybody has to figure out what their purpose is, and so depending on what you're shooting and how, let that be your guide. But for what I shoot, which right now is pretty general because sometimes I'm out, sometimes I'm out hiking, haven't really been climbing a lot. A lot of the times I'm shooting, portrait stuff, a lot of candid stuff on the fly. I don't want to be messing with, Wi-Fi menus to adjust settings on the GoPro. I'd rather just have everything right where I need it. So those are my thoughts about GoPro, and I'm going to dig into the chat. Thank you guys for being patient. And also, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, just since some people might be wanting to tune out at this point, if you just came here for the GoPro conversation, make sure you subscribe, enable notifications, because I am going to be doing these streams at odd times because my ability to stream is predicated on having space and clarity to be able to set everything up and not be disturbed. So right now I have that time, so I'm going for it. Um, so and also, I do have Amazon links in the bottom of the description of the video, even Amazon links to the GoPro stuff that I just got done hating on. Again, not universally hating on for my purposes and what I need. So if you want to support the channel, you can use those to do any shopping that you're doing as well. So Sean Kim, I don't know if you're still around, but miss you too. Good to see you on here. Scott. Yeah, Scott's Wild Camper says, hey there, you're looking well. You were stressed out a while back. And Scott, hope you get the chance to catch up with us a little bit later. Definitely, well, I'm still kind of stressed out, but it's different. I'm not stressed out by YouTube anymore. I'm more stressed out by going into my last semester of nursing school, having invested a lot of time and effort into that, and, wanting to kind of move on to being done, and still living with my dad while I'm finishing nursing school, and that's one of the things that is incredibly challenging, and that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, overall, progress has been pretty consistent in my life since the last time I was on here. But there's as you get stronger, the challenges get bigger, so it always feels like there's kind of a constant state of tension that is useful. Abel Castillo is here. Good to see you, Abel. King Yuzi is here. So King Yuzi asks, what does my friend want to use the camera for? She's going to be doing some traveling, and it's kind of general camera stuff just for travel shooting. And she wants to do a little bit of video, and she wants to do a little bit of photo. For what she indicated to me, my recommendation was a Sony RX100 Mark III or 4, because the Mark IV has really good video features. It also has a built-in ND filter. Like in the world of point and shoot cameras, I have a hard time not recommending the Sony RX100 family of cameras because they're very small. They're almost a little bit too small for me and my hands. I don't love their menus, but once you kind of nail down the menus, the fact that they have a built-in ND filter is amazing. You can shoot video really nicely with it. It has good stabilization, reasonable stabilization, not a lot, but for something that little. I mean, you can shoot really beautiful 4K video with a RX100 Mark IV, and the stills are raw, and Zeiss lens. It's for a package that you can get for between $400 and $500. That is the one big downfall is the batteries. The camera just chews through the batteries, and the menu system is a little clunky, but you can get past that. So if you have to have one camera to do it all, that's the one that I like, at least for somebody who doesn't already know. Because one of the hard parts when you're talking about anything, with buying cameras is, the way I started is I bought one camera, figured out what I liked and didn't like, got rid of that, bought another camera, figured out what I didn't like, and I kind of changed my cameras based on the different things that I was shooting, and eventually I just got multiple cameras because I understood that certain cameras are going to be for certain things. The GH5 that I'm shooting this stream on is a really good video camera. It's also, it's as close to what I would want in a hybrid camera as is realistic, but if I'm going out to shoot stills, I just enjoy shooting stills with a Fuji more because I like having everything external. It's like a film camera. You got your shutter speed, your ISO, and you got your aperture. And other than that, you're not really monkeying with too much, at least the way that I shoot. So it's a as a generalist, my goal is always to try to steer people away from getting cameras that are gonna leave them wanting or needing to acquire something else in order to be able to adapt their shooting to most of the situations that they might encounter. It's still possible that she's going to find herself in a situation where, yeah, GoPro would be nice, but 90% of the rest of the stuff, I think she's going to be much better served. And again, I can't help but, um, want to, like, when people ask me about buying cameras, I give them my advice, and usually it's like they usually ask me my advice about buying a camera because they're hoping that I'm going to confirm what they already like based on what they believe about marketing. I had another friend who asked me about, like, oh, I want to get a professional camera. Like, that's not a thing. It's like an assault rifle. That's not a thing. It does not exist. There's no difference between this rifle, like a wooden stock rifle, and one that's all modded out and that has fancy optics on it and looks scary. They do the exact same thing, but people call one this, and then they think of the other one as being something that Elmer Fudd carries around. It's the same thing with cameras. A bigger camera is not necessarily a professional camera. Basically, if the camera shoots raw photos in a raw format, you can make professional grade work with it. And there are probably some who would argue beyond that and even say even JPEGs now are usable for a lot of stuff like that. Um, yeah, Pedro Santos says glad to see you back. Good to see you back as well. Or good to see you as well, Pedro. Thank you for taking the time to tune in here. Yeah, the blown highlights do not look good on those photos. And I'm not a pixel peeper. I'm going to do a video or a stream at some point here and show you guys, kind of go through some of my favorite photos that I've taken over the last year and a half with the XT1, which again, in my last live stream, I got raked over the coals for misstating this is not a 10-year-old camera. It's like a 5 or 6-year-old camera. But in electronic years, 5 years is like, that's a long ways away. It's still an old camera. But just to illustrate, I want to show you guys some of those images on the next stream, or one of the next streams I do, just to illustrate the fact that, like, if you have a camera with a good lens that shoots raw, that's easy to use, everything else is just kind of your preference. And I think Yuzi says point and shoot is the best option for all-around casual camera if you're not trying to be a pro. And I would tend to agree with that because, like, it's really hard to overcome the idea and the marketing that suggests that the camera makes the picture. But the truth is, learning to see or anticipate what your camera is going to see without having to put the camera up to your eye so that you're able to kind of look at scenes and see them as your camera would, and then you just shoot and you've got it instead of monkeying around with a bunch of stuff. One of the things I don't really care for about the GoPro is that a lot of times, at least with some of the models, if you're not hooked up via Wi-Fi, and again, I know this doesn't necessarily, some of them have like external displays and some of the newer ones have like the displays, but a lot of times with the GoPros, the what you're able to see in the viewfinder, even if you have some visual reference in the display, it's when it's like the size of a postage stamp, you're not really able to compose as precisely. And if you're shooting skydiving or you're shooting something like, paragliding or surfing, it's going to look cool enough just based on the fact that you're jumping out of an airplane and flying through the sky at 100 miles an hour. That's cool enough that the composition isn't something you have to be really deliberate about. The value of the photo is in the fact that you were able to get a photo doing this thing that was so far outside the realm of normal human activity. That's the redeeming factor. But when you're just shooting mundane, normal stuff, composition is huge. It's a huge thing. Like, you don't have good composition in your photo and you can't be precise about that, and you don't really know what your camera is going to see every time, then that's going to result in a lot of missed photos. And I've you know made a video about my friend Martin probably a year or so ago, about his perspectives, and I'll link that in the notes on this video. Kind of, I've always kind of joked with him because I always come out to visit him. We go climbing up in Banff or in the Bugaboos, like really spectacular. Where a lot of those climbing shots that I was going through with you guys, um, you know, he'll put out, I'll come up there with my newest camera, at least in the past when I was, semi-professional and could write camera purchases off of my taxes. I would go up there with my latest and greatest camera, and he'd be shooting the same old thing that he shot since like he was in high school. And he would get his pictures were, there were some cases again where it's like I would have a little bit advantage with the autofocus, with the dynamic range, and of course he never edits anything. He just shoots JPEG and is fine with that. But what he's able to do by just paying attention to lighting and using composition, he makes amazing looking photos without having gear that would be kind of laughable from a technological standpoint, stuff that is legitimately like 12 years old. And I mean, there's a lot of difference. I think his camera shoots like 4 or 6 megapixel shots, and that's pretty small, limited, relatively speaking, compared to what we're using a lot of the time now. So it's just always funny to me how a lot of practice with a lesser camera gives you better results, and usability is a big part of that. Quality for point and shoots has come a long way, says King Uzi. Yes, I agree with that. I mean, in my opinion, it's been good for a long time. I made actually my very first photography video on this channel, which is kind of where I started going into photography videos. I just randomly made a video about the RX 100 Mark II and how, for my purposes, it was better than the Mark IV, or maybe it's the Mark V. I forget. It was a few years ago, and of course, everybody. I wasn't expecting it to take off. I wasn't expecting anybody to pay attention to it, and so some of the Sony fanboys got a hold of me, and they were like, roasting me in the comments. And but the point was then, as I believe even now, like if you don't need to be shooting 30 frames a second for a still photograph, like if you can't do it in 1 or 2 shots, you know, what are you trying to do with 30 frames per second? Like that's not going to be the difference between, oh, this is a great photograph and oh, this is a terrible photograph. There are other much more basic things that you could stand to be focusing on, no pun intended, that would improve your ratio of keepers if you would just focus on those things without buying a camera. But again, that defeats the purpose of what YouTube is doing. So right now, I believe the RX 100 line is like up to Mark 7 or 8 now, and I still think the Mark II, which is pretty long in the tooth in camera years, to me it's a fantastic camera, and I've shot a lot of. I'm trying to say I don't have any of those pictures in here hanging up, because this is like my computer room. This isn't in my other room where I usually shoot stuff. But yeah, I like to encourage people not to be too tied up on the latest and greatest stuff, and so hopefully this video will elucidate a little bit of that. For video purposes, even if it's one person shooting by themselves and you don't have, you need to kind of have something to like a set it and forget it, where you're going to do a time lapse or something like that, and you're going to need a bunch of cameras to put around, which this is outside the scope of what I think my friend wants to do. But yeah, I've always been impressed with their marketing, that their marketing of GoPros is so good that it could make me buy and sell and rebuy and resell and rebuy and resell. I think this is the third or fourth iteration of a GoPro camera that I have used, and then reminded myself of like, oh yeah, that's right. I don't actually like these cameras, and I have a lot of problems using them. Their marketing is that good that it's like they still kind of drag me back in and make me feel like, oh man, maybe if I just did it a little bit differently or something, it would be it would work out a little bit better. So, anyways, I think I'm going to start wrapping this up because it looks like the chat is quieting down. Um, I want to do these live streams when I get a chance. Typically, the live streams are going to go like this, where the first 10 minutes will be my kind of advertised content of whatever the video is about. And then after that, we can just kind of kick things around in the chat. If you guys have any other questions, comments, things you want to discuss, you can drop that in the chat or leave a comment if you're watching after the fact. Um, but so far, this is the most accessible means of interacting with you guys and being able to make videos. I know that there's still stuff that's lacking when you're live streaming because you don't get to finish and polish everything the same way that you would on an edited video. But my time being what it is right now, I'm off. I'm off from school for the next month, but I got a decent amount of traveling and work, and then also early work that I need to do for school, not just like financial work. I'm working at a fitness center, running their swimming pool and swim lessons program and stuff like that. So I got a lot on the plate, but I definitely do want to stay connected here with this channel, keep you guys abreast of the stuff that I'm doing. And I like being able to talk about cameras because it's funny when I did the live stream the other night, I realized like how much of my CPU in my brain has shifted over to medical terminology and trying to access camera talk just was like tripping over stuff and the thing and the thing over there by the it's like wasn't able to be very precise in my speech about cameras. And I do still enjoy photography and I think about it a lot. um, King Yuzi asks if I'm announcing my streams beforehand on Twitter. Good question. Probably not on Twitter because I'm not really on Twitter on purpose. I know I still have a Twitter account where, like, if I like a video on YouTube, apparently that goes to my Twitter, but I never check my Twitter. I'm going to try to announce on Instagram before I go live. This was a little bit of a rush job, so I wanted to just kind of crank this out there. And and if any of you guys, I know this is, I'm not doing any kind of Patreon or anything like that because for me at this point I don't want the pressure of business, or this being a business. At some point, I may go that route and start creating regular content again. For now though, if there's any big purchases that you're going to make, and you'd like to support the channel, you can let me know and I'll link specific things to, Amazon links. If you're going to buy stuff through Amazon, I can link it for you. And if not, that's totally fine too. I mean, I have a bunch of stuff linked down there below that just kind of helps offset the cost of like, some of the new gear that I've gotten to facilitate the streaming, which fortunately has come down in price a lot since the last time I was on here. So that's nice, but just want to throw that out there. Abel says the marketing is key for GoPro. A lot of people are buying those just for what they're showing. That's definitely what got me into it. I really liked, what was the name of that dubstep band that they used to play all their songs? I forget the Pretty Lights, I think. The Pretty Lights music and like the way they edited everything with like these cuts. It's a sharply edited video. With cool stuff, with a lot of processing, and there's sometimes when it does look really good, you know, and yeah, that marketing piece is really something. Um, cool, yeah. So I will do my best to announce these on Instagram. Being perfectly candid, like I'm still a little bit like nervous coming on here because I look at stuff and I'm like, what do I have to say that people need to hear or that's useful? Like, does anybody? I don't know. It's the any of you that have done any sort of content creation, that's kind of a normal thing that or at least for me, I think for a lot of other people too, like where you overthink things and you're just like, what's the point of this? This is dumb. Nobody actually cares about this or needs to hear it. Um, So I'm always a little reticent about putting stuff on my Instagram and telling people like, hey, come check this out, because then they're going to come over here and I'm just like blathering about like, you know, stumbling through my video intro, because the first 5 minutes are me just trying to get comfortable and you know, whatnot. So, anyways, yeah, I'm going to do a better job with that, and I'm going to try to get be a little more predictable with the live streams at some point. Although for the next month, it's not going to be predictable, but I can announce them in advance for sure. I can do that much. But in terms of having a predictable schedule, because my schedule right now is all over the place, it's just going to have to be run and gun, but I'll announce it on Instagram. Because I'm not really on Facebook. I have Living Vertical has a Facebook, but I don't use it. I detest Facebook for a variety of reasons. Some are very practical, some are more philosophical. But it all adds up to like I hate Facebook and I don't use it. Same thing kind of with Twitter. Instagram is a huge time suck, but that's it's one place that makes sense for me to be. So I have some place to post my photos and what have you. So yeah, I've also kind of learned a lot about why I enjoy uh, live streaming, and live streaming is different from an edited video. And I'm trying to kind of make these live streams just so that you guys know where I'm coming from. I'm trying to make the live streams kind of serve two purposes. I want to be able to talk about a specific topic and give discrete information, like today about the GoPro stuff. And then also, I want to be able to have kind of the back end of each stream to just ramble on as long as, you know, you guys have comments or questions and there's stuff to talk about in the chat. Um, and one of the things that I want to do, and I should have mentioned this earlier, I want to do photo critiques. I have at least um, one photo critique that one lady who actually watched this channel way back in the day, and I got her into Fuji camera. She sent me some photos that she took on like the Fuji photo walk when she was in New York City, and I realized that I hadn't gotten back to her, given her any feedback on the photos. So I was like, you know what? I'm starting up the live streams again. So I would like to offer that to any of you guys if you want to, you know, shoot me an email that has like 5 to 10, no more than 10 photos, let's say like 5 or 6 photos attached. You can shoot that to livingvertical@gmail.com, or you can, you know, if you don't, I'll put my email address in the or the notes for the video. If you have like a series of photos that you want to get critiqued, and basically my purpose or my vision for the critiques is not to be all artsy fartsy about it, but just to notice things and to kind of go through a series of photos and just say, here's what I like, here's what I would have done different. And I'm doing that in some cases with some of my own photos, you know, where it's not, because like the more I look at my own photos, I always see stuff that it's like, okay, here's something that I noticed looking at the photo after the fact, or a year after the fact, even from when I edited, that I didn't notice even when I sat down to edit and I was looking at it. So we can always sharpen our ability to observe by looking, you know, taking a better look at our own work and looking at others' works. So I'm going to critique some of my photos and throw those out there for you guys to add some critiques as well on my work, and also, you know, on some of the other folks that have offered. So again, if you want to have some of your photos just, you know, critiqued, shoot me an email, livingvertical@gmail.com, and we can work that into the rotation, because that's one nice way to kind of kick things off, because there's only so much discussion of like gear and various photographic topics that I can realistically do without kind of beating a dead horse. So all right. If anybody else has anything, drop it in the comments. Oh, I was going to actually say, if you guys haven't ever checked out, there's a YouTuber, and I know some of you may know this YouTuber and may, you know, be cringing when I say that Copper Cab. If you've never heard of him, it's the Gingers Have Souls kid, who was on the like South Park video way back in the day. His live streams now, like he did these videos that South Park made fun of, And now he's like, you know, kind of half grown up, but he does these live streams that are just like epic, and he loses his mind about stuff. Like, he gets so irritated, and I think he's a troll. I think a lot of the stuff that he says is just kind of like, you know, just to try to get people to react, and that's like what his whole stream is. It's definitely a different model um, than what I'm using, but it definitely got me in touch with the entertainment and the fun and the, you know, the value of live streaming compared to other ways of connecting with your audience on YouTube. So um, I'd recommend checking his stuff out. Not saying that that's the type of live streaming that I want to do. I'll put that in the notes as well underneath here, but just kind of, it was a wake up call for me to realize that, hey, live streaming isn't like, you know, the poor man's vlog. It's actually something that has some standalone value in its own right, I believe. So, and again, a lot of that is preference. Like, it's not for everybody, but right now it's what I can do consistently. So that's kind of where I'm focusing. So, all right, gang. I'm going to call that a. Actually, you know what? Before I do that, let me um, switch over here. I want to go to some of my videos. I want to just to illustrate some of this is a just back to the GoPro stuff for a second. I just want to put one thing that I shot. If my page will load properly. I wanted to show you some of my videos where I've actually used GoPro footage in them, and you can see it kind of works in some cases. It also kind of doesn't in some other cases, but it is very distinctive. Let me see here. I'm gonna have to go a little ways back to find some of these videos. Yes, gonna go back a little bit here. Let's see. Back into my vlogging days when I was vlogging in earnest. I think this might be one of the ones. And of course you gotta wait for the let's see here. Alright, no, that didn't work. Alright, cut. Sorry guys. That didn't work out. I didn't actually plan for that. I don't know if you could tell. I didn't plan for that, but I wanted to show you guys just a little bit of video that I shot, but the one video that I'm thinking of is pretty old, and my memory of like which videos I shot with which cameras is a little bit fuzzy. So anyways, I'm going to end the live stream there. Thank you guys and gals all for, you know, taking the time to tune in. Let me know if there's stuff you want me to talk about. If there's questions that you have, drop that stuff in the comments. I really like live streaming because it is more interactive and it gives you guys more of an opportunity to, you know, steer the conversation of what we talk about. I'm going to always bring something to discuss at the outset of the videos, but kind of where we go and things that you think might be relevant. I really look forward to hearing that from you all, because this is not, you know, the goal of this is not like me lecturing everybody because I'm a professional. I'm actually not a professional, and I like not having the pressure of being a professional. but just being able to say this is my opinion based on what I do, which is different from a lot of professional perspectives and YouTubers that are, you know, looking to establish credibility. I don't really need credibility. You know, I've done a bunch of stuff, and some of it's good, some of it sucks. The stuff that's good could still be better. Some of it I was able to sell, so great. Um, you know, whatever. I don't take myself that seriously, and I like being able to interact with an artistic medium from more of a craft perspective, a craftsmanship perspective, a work perspective, and just kind of for fun, than from a standpoint of like, you know, overly analytical stuff that's just, you know, like the stuff that people with art degrees do. That's not me. Nothing against you if you have an art degree. That's just not my bag. Yes, Abel, I do shoot film somewhat. I haven't shot film. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. I've shot a lot of film recently. I just haven't developed it. So, reaching into my bag of visions, this is what I've been shooting the most. This is a little Minolta Himatic F, and I have a Rollei 35. It's not a 35. It's like an XF 35 or something like that. It looks very similar. It's just all black, but I think the light meter on that is not working. But I always bring this with me every time I go like to see my daughter. And what I do is, you know, I'll shoot a couple of pictures with the, you know, the Fuji Instax, you know, that are usually my timing is off with the Instax shots, but I'll always pop a couple of film shots off as well. And I have like 8 rolls of film, probably that go back 3 or 4 years, and I just haven't developed them yet. I keep them, you know, keep them stored away, but I definitely, I mean, right now it's more a matter of money than anything because getting all those rolls of film developed is probably like $150. So that's also, oddly enough, it's one of the reasons why I like film is because you don't have that immediate gratification. And so you can shoot stuff and then not think about it and then pick up the camera and shoot some more stuff. And then when you're done with the roll, you just put it on a shelf somewhere and you leave it. And then at some point down the road, and I've done this a couple of times already, where I'll just be like, ah, the hell with it. I got an extra $100. Let me develop my film, and I'll send it off, and I'll get everything back. And then it's like, oh yeah, I remember this. Like, and it's stuff that I had totally lost awareness of, but that I have. And so for that reason, like I'm kind of careful about calling myself a film shooter because I don't shoot film enough because the monetary side of it is kind of pricey, you know, to be able to afford developing it. But it's definitely an ingredient that gets seasoned into my photographic work in a very deliberate way because of the nostalgic and the personal connections that I feel that go with that. That you, no matter how good of a camera or how filmic the look of your camera is, which the Fuji X-T1, I mean, really gives a nice film look to a lot of the photos, especially when you edit it in Lightroom and you put on a couple of, you know, different effects and filters. It looks great, but the effect of, you know, an actual film camera has a lot to do with just the not being able to see it right away, and that's something that I really like. But I would love to talk about film. That's a good idea. I'll put that out there for one of my upcoming strams. Maybe what I'll do is I'll bite the bullet and I'll just get my stuff developed, and then that way that'll be a good segue. I can show you guys some of the pictures. We can go over it, and I'll talk a little bit about, you know, what I do with film. Show you guys my film cameras. I used to shoot medium format as well, but that's just uh, yeah, that's just a nightmare for me. A lot of what I like about shooting film is the fact that it's kind of point and shoot and very simple. But medium format, it's at least the medium format cameras that I had um, were a little bit higher maintenance. So Yeah, Kodak 400. That's pretty much what I've been shooting. I shot like some Ektar, some color film at one point. I haven't developed that yet, and honestly, I haven't shot enough to know like if all of my cameras are working. Um, I have a Nikon and a Pentax as well that are a little more like a little beefier. I think it's the Nikon FE2 and the Pentax K1000 if I'm not mistaken. Um, and I kind of got those cameras because I liked the lenses that came with them because I wanted to shoot adapted vintage lenses, which right now I'm shooting on a Nikon 24 millimeter lens. And I shoot most of my video on old manual lenses that I've adapted to the for the Lumix and the GH5. And so I like the lenses that come with the camera and like the M42 lenses, the screw mount lenses for the Pentax cameras. Those are superb on the Fuji. So, it's kind of like a little interchangeability that went with that. I really enjoyed that. Um, and it kind of, it's a way to like revitalize old camera gear. There's something to me that's really exciting about breathing new life into an old piece of gear that's kind of over the hill and that nobody's really interested in. And you pick it up for $50 on eBay. Like, and some of the lenses, like I'll do a stram, a live stram where I talk about, you know, the vintage lenses that I have, and I'll show you guys all my vintage lenses. But most of those I picked up for like $50 or less, and some of them are fantastic lenses, like beautiful, beautiful lenses. They're just manual focus, and most people don't want to. They think, oh, manual focus. That's like, I need the fastest autofocus ever. And I'm gonna pay like $1,000 extra to get that camera that has that super fast, like shaves a tenth of a tenth of a tenth of a second off the autofocus time, whereas slowing down and using the manual focus is a treat. It's luxurious in some ways. All right, gang. I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream. Thank you guys for being here. I've already said the closing stuff a whole bunch, so I will talk to you guys in the next stream, probably in the next like day or two. I'm trying to do like every other day somewhere in that neighborhood, and I will announce when I go on Instagram before I go, so that we get more people in in here. So thanks again, and we'll be seeing you soon. Bye.